Hi there, Ollie Anderson here. I'm an author and creative performance coach. That means that I help people to be more creative in their lives so that they can get better results from whatever projects that they're working on. Usually this involves kind of unblocking themselves, looking at their self-limiting beliefs, figuring out ultimately what's stopping them from being real so that they can move forward and express themselves in the world in the way that they want to. This is the first official episode of Creative Status. We're going to be talking to Sabrina Lindner. She is also a coach and she has some really amazing things to say about getting in a free flow state, unblocking yourself, finding freedom, living your truth. She comes up with some amazing techniques that you can use to figure out your true values and using your creativity to do that. And we also discuss how we can act on all this stuff so that we can go out there and live amazing lives in a real way and using our creativity as the vessel for doing it. If you like this podcast and you like what you hear in the interview that's coming up, then make sure you check out Sabrina on her social media stuff. She gives you information about that at the end. Other than that, all I want to say is that I hope you get some value from this conversation, that it helps you to figure yourself out or figure life out a little bit more. And keep listening to this podcast every week if you want more stuff like this, because I have a ton of interviews on the way and they're all quite exciting and quite interesting, in my humble opinion. I'm going to stop talking now, but here's the interview. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Well, we meet again after you had me on your podcast recently, and now I'm returning the favor or getting revenge on you by inviting you on this one.
I'm not ready for this.
Well, neither of us are really, but I'm sure it's going to work out quite well. I'm feeling confident and positive and blah blah. Do you feel like introducing yourself before we get going?
Of course, I can introduce myself. So my name is Sabrina Lindner. I'm a life coach. I'm also a writer and I'm a podcaster, and generally I love all stuff related to creativity. And I guess that's why I ended up on all these podcasts today.
Yes. Like when you put it like that, you're a terribly creative individual. You're doing all these creative things. And so, of course, I'm not just getting revenge on you by bringing you here today. I'm trying to understand your creative philosophy and to get a better understanding of my own, I suppose, by asking you the right questions and figuring out what you're doing specifically in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that you've talked to me about before, which I think is a good, an interesting starting point for this conversation, is something you have called a free flow state. And this is something that also involves personal intimacy. So those two terms, free flow state and personal intimacy, can you just tell us a little bit more about those to get us going?
Oh, wow. Well, let me start with the free flow. The free flow is something that I think I've always had all my life, but I just started terming it this way sometime last year, I think, when I was writing my first book. And I realized that there's a certain state that I get in when I'm absolutely myself without any attachment to what others might think, what expectations are, what I should be doing or should not be doing. But when I'm absolutely aligned with what my intuition or my gut or whatever tells me to do in that moment. And when I let it run freely, it's an incredible flow of creativity that happens, and some great stuff comes out of it, like drawings or a great podcast episode or a great coaching session or a whole novel, as happened last year. So free flow for me is really the state I love to be in, because it means I'm basically high on my creativity.
That's amazing. To me, it sounds like in those moments that you're talking about, you're just being incredibly real. And so, you know, my stuff, like this whole podcast really is about how you can become more real and how creativity is a vessel for doing that. And I suppose this free flow state that you've just mentioned is you are ultimately getting out of your head in the terms of overthinking or analyzing everything, and having self-limiting beliefs and being attached to your self-image and all that stuff, and you're just getting into the moment and getting into yourself in that moment and seeing what's there to be expressed. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a very fair assessment. And the incredible thing is that when I am in that state, I get so much more of the stuff that really matters done compared to when I'm in the state of, oh, but I should be doing this, you know? And I'm talking about that because early this year, I started my own coaching business. And it was really before I was a sales manager. And I was very much in this structured, boxed in system of, okay, you need to do ABC, you need to hit certain numbers, and you need to fulfill certain parameters, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
when the
yeah.
business is working, right? But I've discovered on my own journey that when I'm in free flow, I don't need to worry about all those parameters. Somehow I just get down to the right tasks that then make my business grow. And that was a
Mm.
very liberating and freeing experience, knowing that, okay, with my creativity, I can actually create a livelihood for myself
Mm.
without having to be stuck in a system that I call conventional, and it is not really in line with who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah. Like that's also something that's really interesting to me. So a lot of the time when I'm coaching people, I notice a similar kind of dichotomy to the one that you just talked about. So
Mm,
if people get stuck in their heads and they become too attached to their plans and they become outcome driven or results driven, then they become so focused on getting the specific results that they're aiming to get that they distract themselves from all the serendipity and the amazing things that can happen in the flow
mm.
state that you're talking about. And it's that serendipitous stuff that actually, usually in my experience at least, leads to finding the solutions to the problems that you're trying to solve anyway. So
Yeah.
there's this, yeah, do you see what I'm saying? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely right. And the amazing thing is that when you are in that flow, in that free flow, it's fun. You know, it's not that you're
Mm.
stressing out or that you have to push yourself. It just happens in a natural free flow state of mind or of heart or soul, however you want to call it. And you need so much less time to do so many more meaningful things to you.
Mm.
And that was really a revelation because I always knew that that was possible because I had had those free flow state moments before. But learning how to be in that every day was a process and a journey.
Yeah. So I suppose that is the next obvious question in this exploration. So we know this free flow state is a thing. We know there's myriad benefits to being in it. Most people listening to this will have experienced it at some stage in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just for like a few hours or a few days or whatever it is. How do we get in that state more often and reap these kind of benefits that we're talking about in terms of creativity and just a better life in general?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think the answer will probably be slightly different for each individual because as
Mm.
humans, of course, we are fundamentally the same, but we are also all very different. And what I mean by that is that, for example, if you are sure of what your your top priority values are,
Mm.
that's sort of a good start in your journey on getting into that free flow state frequently. Because when you know what really matters to you, that's when you can align your action. And when you know how you want your life to be, in the sense, how do you want to feel? Because, often the misconception is that when I imagine, a certain career or going to a certain university or having a
Mm.
certain job or having a certain house and a car, those are all factual things.
Mm. So
But
it's
when you
more.
get,
Oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
It's okay. So, but once we get clear about how do we actually want to feel and what are our topmost values in that, like for me, it's freedom. That's like number one up there.
Yep.
Um, So when I realized, okay, freedom is really what everything in me is driven towards, what does that then mean for my lifestyle? What does that then mean for the kind of job or the kind of relationships or the kind of other things I want to do every day? So starting with that, it is a good beginning of the process, and then it's really raising, the awareness within yourself. What is it actually that I want to get out of this life?
Wow. Like I love how you've stated that, and I agree as well. Like it's ultimately that is the best starting point I've found in my experience. Figuring out your values and then translating those values into behaviors and just using them as a kind of compass to guide you as you move forward, and to raise awareness, like you said, of what you really want from life. How
Mhm.
can people figure out their values? Have you got any simple techniques that people can use, or any starting points for just kickstarting that process?
Well, I hope I'm not going to bore your audience by saying, well, meditation is a good tool. I'm sorry if that bores anyone, but for me, meditation and certain kinds of meditation specifically was really super powerful. But on the other thing was really also using my creativity.
Mm,
So when I wrote my book last year, a whole novel, and I looked at this book at the end of the day and the finished story,
wow.
there was so much in there where I was like, okay, Sabrina, this is what you are thinking regarding this topic. Oh,
Mm,
so this is what matters to you. So you are really
mm.
dreaming about that kind of relationship. And this kind of life is what you really want. Like I had packed it all in that book.
Yeah.
And, a book can just be one example. You can use other tools if you are someone who draws or someone who just imagines walking around in the forest or sitting on the tube. Whatever comes to
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
works for you. But it's all about imagining and letting it reign free, and not let
Mm,
your imagination or your thinking and your emotions be limited by what you think the world can actually provide. Because only if you dream full force and free
mm,
flow is
mm.
when magic can happen.
Yeah. You've just blown my mind a little bit there, because you've said something that's so important, which is that you don't need to do all these cerebral, thinky activities that people do to uncover their values.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to do it, like you just said, is to use your creativity and then retrospectively figure out what your values are in the products of your creative impulses. So for
Mm-hmm.
you said it's writing your novel. For me, I had a similar experience writing my book. I've done other creative things, and always I think the end result shows you what you're actually thinking or what you're
Mm-hmm.
actually feeling, whether you know it or not. And
Absolutely.
ultimately, that's what we're kind of talking about with this free flow state. It's the difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. And a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time, we're just parading around, living our lives, living out a little idea of ourselves in a box, and we're not really acting or thinking or feeling as ourselves. We're doing it in a conceptual way. And these creative activities, they show us who we really are and what we're really doing. And if you use the techniques you're talking about, we can figure out what we need to actually be focusing on to grow real and to keep getting in the free flow state.
Yeah. And I've also felt that descriptive pictures can really make a big difference. Like,
Mm,
um, I had a conversation with a healing practitioner friend of mine, and I described some of the stuff that I was feeling, and she was painting this picture of me putting myself into a cage over and over again in certain situations in my life, to realize how important freedom really was to me, that it was the absolute value that I was like running towards the whole
mm,
time. And that was so mind blowing for me. So sometimes it also helps to let someone else mirror, whatever chaos is in your heart or in your mind.
Wow. And I think in the chaos is where there's the most room for growth.
Yes.
As a result of what you just said, so seeing this picture of the cage and realizing what it meant in the context of your life, what changes did you make as a result of that creative process?
Well, dramatic changes, I would say, in a
Wow.
positive way, because realizing that really cut some of the attachment that I had to conventional thinking. And I knew in my mind that the conventional ways are really not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Simply also because of the way I was brought up from when I was a child. But still we grow up in a certain society. We are conditioned in a certain system. So I was still attached to, oh no, but my way. How can I even dare to think that I can make money with my creative work, for example? Or how
Mm-hmm.
can I even make it happen? I don't know. The system is not made for that. Those were all the thoughts I had in my head. But when that when that friend of mine painted that picture for me, I was like, wait, no. There's no sense in living this life that is not making me fully happy. So let's just go for it. What is the
Mm-hmm.
worst thing that can happen? I might not make it the way I'm thinking, but at least I'll have tried. And
Yeah.
so far it has been working out well. So, but what I'm saying is, like, it sometimes there are those moments of clarity and creativity that make us then go, and it's almost like we cut ties with
Mm-hmm.
our old being and things that hold us back.
Yeah. That's exactly how I see it. So I think most of the time, if we're not living a creative life and we're constantly, pushing through and growing more real and becoming more whole and integrated in ourselves and all of these things, if we're not doing that, it's usually because we got caught up in the conventional, results-driven way of thinking that you've alluded to in this conversation.
Mm,
What do you think causes us as human beings to find comfort in that conventional way of thinking when it actually is the source of the problems and stops us living the lives we want to live and being
mm.
creative in the way we need to?
That's a nice question. I like it.
Well, you're
I
very
think
welcome.
I think what it is I think it's a whole lot, but the one
Mm,
thing that comfort zone does to us, speaking the conventional way of thinking, is it makes us feel safe.
mm,
It makes us feel that we are surviving. It makes us feel that we are not putting our life in danger.
mm.
So I think often it's like fundamental instincts that
Yep.
make us sort of be stuck in the comfort zone. And it takes certain events in our lives or certain conversations, certain happenings for us to realize, wait, this is like a very animalistic way of looking at this life, and I can actually do other things to free myself from that, and then soar and be on a high every day and really
Mm,
enjoy this experience. So I think it's a part of the natural growth of every human that we
mm.
go through a journey of increasing self-awareness, but the conventional way is just a way of us feeling safe in the first
Yeah.
place and
Yeah.
feeling we are not putting ourselves in danger here.
Yeah. So do you think it's fair to say then that creativity ultimately is just a controlled way of breaking away from the structures of the safe conventional systems so we can kind of start to chip away at our own chaos? So we talked about chaos earlier. I kind of joked about it
Mm,
a little bit, but actually when we get on this creative path and we start getting into the free flow and all that kind of stuff, we have to face our own chaos. And the creative projects, writing a book, whatever it is, that allows us to kind of face the chaos, but in a controlled way. So we still feel safe, but we're breaking out of those structures.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying, because I'm just thinking that the creative, when you say creativity is a controlled way to face a chaos, I
Mm.
think systems that humans create are the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Ultimately, any system a human creates is to face the chaos, to face this sense of, okay, what am I actually doing here? I'm feeling quite unsure about this experience called life,
Mm.
and how do I survive this? The only thing is
Wow.
that humans tend to go overboard with their systems at times, and then it
Mm.
becomes a boxed in experience, which then in turn limits the natural process of life, which is growth and expansion and more expansion every time.
Mm. Mm.
Life shouldn't be restricted in any way. And I think that's where human systems have gone wrong at some point in time, that it's always about boxing in and restricting and putting another rule there and putting another thought there that holds you back. But the natural ways of us is actually to expand every day. So I think if we use creativity to fuel that,
Mm.
then that's when free flow, that's when great things happen.
Yeah, 100%. So this is the way that I've been thinking about it as well. So
Mm.
creativity, it's ultimately it's the vehicle for us to allow our wholeness to come to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time, we said earlier in this conversation, so there's this battle going on basically between the conscious and the unconscious, and a lot of the systems we have that are very structured, too rigid, too conventional, they're examples of what I call control freakery. It's systems that we've become attached to and we've created because we want the kind of safety you're talking about, but we don't want that safety to face chaos, but to hide from chaos, if that makes sense. So a lot of those conventional systems of just getting a 9 to 5 job and following the rules and not thinking for yourself and all that stuff, that's a way of avoiding our emotional stuff. So our shame,
Mm.
guilt, trauma. It's fine if people want to avoid that. Obviously, we can't judge, like, it's their lives, whatever. But by avoiding that stuff because of ego resistance, we are ultimately stopping ourselves from allowing this natural process you're talking about of expansion, of moving towards more wholeness, of evolving basically into the next version of ourselves. We're stopping that from happening, which is actually what
Mm.
we need in order to grow and feel happy and get into free flow and feel good. And so a lot of those extremely structured systems that are designed to avoid chaos in life are actually stopping us from thriving in life. They're helping us to survive, not to thrive. It's that old cliched phrase. And so creativity, like we're saying, is actually a way of starting to shift away from those kind of systems and to be able to move and to flow with life, which involves riding the reality waves, as I call them, by embracing chaos instead of hiding from it and seeing where it takes you. But you can only do that with a certain degree of trust in yourself and in life. And so I suppose this gets us onto something you've said before about how you haven't said it in this conversation, in a previous conversation, about how you have to be open to receiving. And you can
Mm-hmm.
only do that if you trust. So
Yeah.
is there something here about, accepting chaos, but also trusting chaos to some extent if you can have the right relationship with it, which involves a degree of openness?
Mm. I want to say something else that popped into my mind, but it's somehow related to what you are just saying, this openness to receiving, because I
Okay.
think that's like super important. But right in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned intimacy that's related to the free
Yeah,
flow
yeah, yeah.
state.
Yeah,
So
I
I want
forgot
to
about that.
say something about that and how it relates to us actually hiding from chaos. You
Mm,
spoke about pain, trauma, the judgment and all that. So we are using systems, conventional systems to hide from that. But I don't think it's only that. Looking at how many of us walk through this life, I think many humans don't only hide from the negative emotions, they also hide from the
Yeah, yeah,
positive emotions.
100%, 100%.
Because, sometimes, I don't know, maybe you have experienced that, or someone who's listening later on will resonate with that. Sometimes when we are confronted in a free flow state with the excitement and the level of high that you can get out of it, it's actually scary. I was scared when I
Yeah.
started, being conscious of that state and
Mm,
consciously moving into it. So, I would sometimes actually suppress my true emotions because I felt it was too much to handle.
wow.
Because when I'm fully in that state and I'm stuck, let's say, in a job that I really don't like, I
Mm,
feel the sense of being trapped so intensely that it's almost unbearable.
yeah,
And
I've
I
been
think
there.
that's what many people are scared of. So it's the negative and the positive emotions that we might be hiding from. And if we talk then about intimacy and trust,
Mm,
you can imagine how that influences all those interactions, the interactions with our own chaos, but also the interactions with the chaos with other people,
mm,
because we haven't been taught to deal with these intense emotions, whether they are the positives, the high, or they are the negatives, the lows. So, it takes a process to embrace that fully, from
yeah,
my experience.
wow. So there's so much amazing stuff you just said. So there's a few things there that I want to say about that. So what you've said about the positive and the negative emotions is so important. And actually,
Mhm.
I couldn't agree more. I'm so glad that you said it. So what we're ultimately talking about now is creativity's relationship to the shadow side of each human individual. And so the shadow in Jungian psychology, a lot of people think it's just these negative things about us. They think it's our anger or our shame or our guilt. We're hiding all that stuff. But actually, what you said is completely true and completely right in my experience. It's the positive things as well. So some people, for example, may be ashamed to express their own joy about certain things, or
Mhm.
they may not be able to love because of maybe when they're a kid. I don't know, they were too affectionate or whatever it is. Someone made them feel stupid. So they sent that part of themselves into hiding. And all of
Mhm.
these things, they're still real. They never go anywhere and they need to come to the surface. The problem, a lot of the time, or most of the time, is that when these things do start to come to the surface, people start to panic because they haven't seen that side of themselves for so long, and they've created a version of themselves, the ego version, the false version, that is supposed to be what they would be without that version. So they can continue to disown it, they can keep casting it aside,
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff. And so people have these experiences that you're talking about where they will feel something that they haven't felt for a long time, even just freedom, and they it feels alien to them. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know if something crazy is happening to them, if they're losing their minds. They're worried because they don't know where that feeling might lead them because
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So in your case then, when you felt that freedom of getting into the flow state of allowing some of these shadow parts of yourself to emerge, do you think you were scared of the feeling itself, or were you scared of where it might take you next, or was it just a combination of those things, or something completely different? Like what do you think was actually going on in that moment where you were still holding back a little bit?
I think it was a combination of it all. It was a combination of shock that all that was actually inside me,
Yeah, yeah.
because it was such an intense sensation. And the other thing was, of course, well, where would that take me if I let it rain free?
Mm,
And then what happens when I get back into my other state? That
wow.
was right in the beginning of my journey, like getting back in touch with all those emotions. So I was like, okay, I'm feeling that intensely in this moment, and it's an
Mm.
absolute high. What happens when I drop out of it and I'm back in reality, so to speak?
Yeah.
The reality that I hadn't yet shaped into what I really wanted it to be. right? I was right in the beginning. So that was, I think, a fear. And that's what I've also heard many people say when I coach people who are stuck in situations
Yeah.
where they are absolutely unhappy. They say, I can't even meditate, or I can't even do XYZ or my creative stuff or think about it too much, because then I can't bear my life. I can't bear waking up in the morning to the same doomed reality. And that's a very painful state to be in, right in the beginning, when we realize something is not working anymore here. And we are all these scattered parts. And as you say, all the shadows are starting to emerge, and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get
yeah.
really scared.
Do you know what's really interesting to me there is the way you've framed it is how most people would see it, which is that you've gone from reality to this crazy, unreal situation where you feel amazing and you're connected to life and you're flowing and everything, and then you have to go back to reality. Actually, the way that I would look at it is it's the other way around. So
Yeah.
you've gone from unreality to reality because you removed all the barriers to your true self and the free flow and all that stuff. That's the real stuff, right? And then you have to go back to your unreal life, and because you've tasted actual realness, actual reality, the unreal life will seem even more unsatisfying than it was. But the
Yeah.
problem I think in the world in general is that most people think that the unreal things about them are the real version. And when they taste this real shit because it starts emerging and coming up from the shadows, or they just get connected to life itself in a real way, it feels alien and strange to them because they've spent their whole lives actually being conditioned to be unreal. And so it's sorry.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Right? There's something even in how we use the word reality that's ultimately, okay, wrong is a strong word, but it's a misconception to say that waking up unhappily every day and going to a job you hate, being in a relationship you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
happy in,
yeah,
buying or building that house and buying that car you don't really care about, all those things that people, and no judgment there. If you love to do that, do it. But if you don't, if you're not happy and super excited and bright every day and light every day doing all those things, then that's not reality.
yeah, yeah.
So there's
Like
something wrong in the way we use that word. I totally agree.
yeah, like I found that myself. Like just a lot of my books are about that realness,
Yeah.
and in my coaching stuff, people think reality is a bad thing. It's got a bad reputation, but
A very
actually,
bad reputation.
yeah, but reality actually is the most amazing thing you can kind of tap
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
And it's unreality that causes the problems. It's the unreality or the unreal ways of thinking, the unreal ways of seeing yourself, etc., that cause you to end up in this crappy life that you don't want, where you're in the wage cage, as I call it. You got a job that just does nothing for you. It's not aligned with your values. You probably got some idiot boss breathing down your neck. You just got no joy or anything in your life, and it's because at some level you have started to not trust and believe in yourself. And so instead of following your own chaos, to use the language we've been using, you just followed your social conditioning, you followed your fears about yourself, you followed all of the stuff that makes you think you're unreal, and then you end up paying the price. And there's a way out of it, which is to start being more real, to start being creative in the way that you're talking about, to start bringing these things to the surface that you need to face, to become aware of reality again and to accept it, and then to take action. What do you think is causing this misconception around reality in general?
Oh,
That's a big question. So
that's a big question, Ollie. You want me to solve like the big mystery of
yes,
human systems and societies, but
we'll solve it
there's
now, and then we'll go start a political party after this podcast.
no, thank you. Maybe a revolution, that's more to my liking.
Viva.
Yeah, but what something you said about reality brought this thing, another misconception. I think that's closely linked to it, And that also sort of feeds into the question you just asked about what's causing that. The idea that nothing comes easy in life and this concept of pain. I don't know when and how it started because, I can't remember all my past lives, but there's something that happened in the human experience. And when those systems were created, that someone started saying like pain is what life is all about. And it's almost like human beings many times validate their worth through the pain they have gone through. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, that keeps us from living in the reality we just described, which is the awesome high every day.
Yeah. I think it's.
And
Sorry.
yeah, no, you go ahead. I want to
Well,
hear what you thought.
what I was going to say is there's the Buddhist thing, right? So the Buddhists famously say life is suffering, and I think it's true to some extent. Of course, every human being on the planet is going to suffer at some stage. You can't avoid it, right? Like people you care about are going to drop dead, relationships are going to end, you might get sick, whatever it is, right? But bad stuff happens all the time. There's the car bumper sticker as well, the famous car bumper sticker. It just says shit happens. It's true. That is part of being alive on this planet. So you can't avoid those kind of things. The thing that you can avoid doing, in my opinion, is like you just said, once something has happened to you and you've been through a painful experience, you can stop identifying with it, because as soon as you identify with it and you think that it defines who you are, well, that stops you moving and it stops you flowing, and it ultimately prevents you from facing the emotional stuff and facing your own chaos and blah, blah, blah. It stops you from getting in the free flow state and living the life you actually want to live. So instead of identifying with it, the creative approach, in my opinion, is to learn from it and to move on. Because if you're not moving, that's when you end up being unreal and having all these kind of issues that we've talked about.
Yeah, and it's about, these three wonderful things like judgment, shame, and guilt. These are usually attached to the pain, whatever pain it is.
Yeah.
And when we have those, that's very strong attachment because these are heavy, darker emotions. They pull us down. And actually, I've seen a lot of writing these days about self-sabotaging, on the saboteurs in your mind. And there is a lot of concepts around that, but it's actually just, you are, because you validate your worth through that pain you have gone through, you actually stop yourself from the creative process of finding a simple solution. It can't be simple, because if it's simple, then what am I doing here? Then I'm not, my value is not high because it was not extra painful. It's a very strange thing that happens.
Yeah.
But
Like,
but that's the thinking process I've seen with lots of people.
no, I've seen the same thing. Like people often want things to be more complicated than they are,
Yeah.
just so they don't have to face reality or the truth. And that's
Yeah, but
because,
it's oh,
so,
sorry.
sorry, I was just in the short term, reality might piss you off. It might annoy you. It might upset you. But that's not reality itself. It's just because it's exposed a gap between the way you want to see yourself or the way you want to believe in the world and the way it actually
Absolutely.
is. That's all it is. It's the truth will set you free. But at first it will
Yeah.
piss you off, and first it will make you miserable. But
Yeah.
the truth itself, reality itself, is never a bad thing. It's just your journey back there might bring up some emotional stuff that you're not ready to face. And that's why so many people try to resist it and avoid being creative and living the lives they want to live, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's where the trust topic comes in that you mentioned earlier, right? Like
Yes.
if I don't have the trust in just myself and that I'm just as I want to be, the real person, not the what you call ego, in the fake
Yeah.
reality, but in the real reality, if I trust in that person, then I can do so much. I can basically do anything. I know that sounds like a phrase, an empty phrase, but it's real.
No, I agree. Like,
But it's about that gap that you just said, like trusting that you can overcome that gap and trusting that with time it's going to happen if you keep at it. And that's why the free flow is so important, because if I can manage to get into the free flow on a daily basis, I will do actions, I will go through actions, flow through actions that are taking me to my real self and slowly closing the gap.
yeah, 100%. And I'm so happy that you mentioned the action thing, because I think a lot of people, when they're talking about this kind of stuff, they think that all you need to do is just trust and not do anything. But you have to take some actions to close that gap between where you are and where you're trying to get to, or where you need to be, which is always the more real version of yourself. If you don't actively get involved in that process, then it means you're not trusting yourself. You're trying to trust like a unicorn or an idol or an illusion. You're not trusting reality, because
well, unicorns are quite cool. I would also want
they're
to
cool,
trust a
but
unicorn.
I would never trust one.
You
But
didn't
like,
know I'm a unicorn?
am I talking to one now? I didn't realize.
Yes.
I apologize. All right, I trust them a little bit. But anyway, but yes, you have to trust yourself in order to trust reality. Because if you're real and reality are real, then they're one and the same. If you're talking about wholeness and fragmentation and blah 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 blah. And in terms of what you've said, I think the key word that stops people, or the key thing that stops people from trusting, is judgment. If they judge themselves, they stop being real. If they judge the world, they stop seeing how other people are, how amazing everybody can be. If they judge reality, then they don't move with it, they don't flow. And it's because, in my view, the only thing you can do with reality, whether it's your realness or reality itself, the only thing you can do with it really is accept it and then work with it or not. And so if you're not accepting it, then you're judging it at some level. And that's all of the non-creative conditioning and bullshit that we picked up that stops us from seeing clearly. What do you think about that?
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm still thinking about this point with the action, because I think that's a key point. So, what my experience is in this is that a combination of, imagining, dreaming,
Yep.
and really allowing everything to come up, all the emotions you want to feel, the good, the bad, however, no judgment there. Let it all come up and really let it all bubble up, and imagine, how do you want to feel every day in your life? How do you want to walk through these years that you will spend here? And the clearer you are on that, I feel, the easier it is again to jump into the action. So don't detach the, all the imagination and all that dreaming part from the actions. They have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's the most powerful process.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I should have been clearer. So I don't think we shouldn't just take actions for the sake of it. We need to make sure that the actions we're taking are going to lead us to somewhere that's real in the long run. So something I'm always talking about is awareness, acceptance, and action. So first, you need to become aware of what's real, basically, for you, your true values, your true intentions. Then you need to accept what's caused you to stop embracing and facing those things in the first place. Then you need to act on it. And a really important part of the process, like you just said, is creating a vision. You need to use your creativity ultimately to create a vision for yourself that is going to, be compelling. It's going to charge you up. It's going to be aligned with your true values. It's going to excite you, and it's going to act as a kind of magnet that kind of draws you towards the future that you want to be in. So a question for you now is, how do we create this vision for our future that is actually real? It's not just a vision that is an extension of all like unreal ego bullshit, that's going to cause us to just, remain trapped in this unreal world that we've talked about?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I was just thinking of all those vision boards and all, there are so many exercises out
Yeah,
there
yeah,
that you can
yeah.
do, goal setting and quarterly reviews, and then you should do this and that, and it gets complicated. And it's another painful system you get stuck in while you're
Yeah,
actually thinking you are creating your dream
yeah, and
vision,
that, and sorry, the other trap there is that if you don't do some of this deeper work that you're talking about, then the vision you create is actually just going to keep you enslaved to the ego, basically, whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it. All
yeah,
the
to
things
the
that is,
unreal state.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So a simple example is, you might think that the key to your happiness is you're going to have a Lamborghini one day or something, and that's the extent of your vision, because your ego feels like the Lamborghini is going to compensate for your feelings of shame or whatever it is you've got going on. Not you specifically,
Mm.
Sabrina, saying. And yeah, so that's a simple example. Nothing wrong with Lamborghinis. Like, if you want one for
Exactly.
a
If
real,
you want a Lamborghini, get it by all means. So
yeah,
again, that's the thing also. Often when we start dreaming, or we create our goals and vision, we don't realize that we think a lot about what others would want us to want, or what
yes,
others would think about that dream of
yeah,
ours, and
yeah,
all that stuff, all
yeah.
that attachment. So I would say the best way to check whether what you are thinking about and dreaming about makes sense for you, is, how does it
Mm,
really make you feel?
mm,
In the
mm,
quiet moment, do you get excited? If you tell yourself, okay, let's imagine there's no one who's going to care, give any shit about what I do, what would I actually want to do? If I
mm,
allow myself to let that bubble up, what would come up? And that's a very powerful question. I must say, I spend hours in a week just dreaming and imagining, because I absolutely love it. But
mm,
not everyone does that, no? So spend time, like even an hour each day, to just imagine and dream. And eventually you will stumble across that story in your head that
mm,
really excites you from
mm,
deep down inside.
mm,
And there's a different level to it, a different level of intensity when you stumble across that, because
mm,
you will realize that it's not attached to what your mother told you, or what your spouse might think, or what your friends will say. It's really something that
mm,
you secretly have been harboring inside your heart. So
mm,
let that
mm,
bubble up. And it might take time, because depending with how much you have like suppressed and for how many years, it
mm,
might take time to really come across that.
mm. So, can we say that everybody has that inside them somewhere? Do you think that intense vision that is going to pull them back towards their real life? It, um,
Yes,
yeah, I agree. I
without
think,
any doubt.
yeah, I think that's,
Creativity is in anyone, and a vision is in anyone, because we are all humans and we are here to experience, to enjoy, and to
yes.
live. What else is this life for?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the first barriers that a lot of people need to overcome is if when they get on this path is getting rid of the self-limiting belief that they're not creative, that they don't have a vision, and
Hmm.
at least being open to that so they can receive that. And I suppose that is a nice segue into this.
Oh, yes.
I didn't do that on purpose, actually. That must be my unconscious chaos bringing me where I need to be. But
You want to talk about the openness to receiving, I know.
yeah, but do you think that like the openness to receiving it's the what you've just said kind of does bring us back to that, because only if you're open to yourself are you going to receive that real life that's waiting for you down the line.
Yeah,
Only if you're open to the chaos are you going to get the order and stability that you really want. And so you do have
yes.
to be open to reality, even if it's painful, to receive pretty much anything that's worth having. Freedom, truth, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely like, it's something you can train yourself to feel. I learned
Mm,
that you can train yourself, you can practice every day to just feel that you are absolutely an open, I don't know what, something open, just a container even, or whatever you fancy, and you are ready to be filled with opportunities, with stuff to come your way. And if you walk around like that, it's amazing what comes to you, whether it's an idea, whether it's a conversation just on the street, whether it's a business opportunity that you have been waiting for, or a creative project that suddenly pops up, whatever it might be. But only when you have that sense of I am open and I'm not closed to any possibility in this world is when the real stuff can come to you.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, I really actively practice that. Like, sit down, close your eyes, I'm open. And there's a shift in how you feel energetically when you get to that point. So if you keep practicing it, you know, it becomes a natural, and you can actually feel, okay, now it's switched on. Oh, watch out. Now you are closed. Now you're blocking opportunities that might come your way.
Do you think part of that is by going through that energetic shift, or whatever you want to call it, training yourself to do that, you're just changing the story of your life. So instead of just repeating the same old story you've been telling yourself that, oh, you know, this is the way my life is and things only work out this way, all these limiting thoughts, by being open, you just circumvent that. And as you go about your life, you're just more aware that there's all this amazing stuff there all the time anyway. All these amazing
Yeah.
relationships and opportunities and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think it's more than that, because before I started doing that, I had, you know, I've always been interested in this self-development stuff from when I was a child. So I've always been aware of thoughts and about the things that I'm telling myself. But there is a difference between what my mind thinks and what I actually feel inside. And the powerful stuff happens when both of those are aligned, my thoughts and my feelings or emotions, however you want to call them.
Wow.
So that energy shift can only happen when it's not just in your head. And that's where we circle back onto the earlier topic. That only happens when you are willing to embrace the intensity of your true emotions, because that's when you can actually start sensing the energy shifts inside of you, the emotional shifts. Because let's be real, people say they make big life decisions based on rational sense or on their mind or their thoughts, but actually what controls their biggest decisions is often fear or worry, anxiety, self-doubt. Those are all emotions. It's emotions that control like what we do in our life. So that's why I'm saying it's so important to embrace those first. And that's when we can do the real energy shift.
Yeah, completely agree again, because most of the time, if you only live in your head, then you're just going to become closed. You're going to be forcing everything. You're going to be blocking opportunities, etc. If you only live in your heart, well, you're going to be so open-minded that your brain falls out. Ultimately, you're going to not really have any structure in your life. You're not going to take the actions that you need to take. Any feeling that pops up, you're going to follow it. And so what you need to do is to align your head and your heart by using them to create the vision in the way that we've talked about, to dedicate yourself to taking the actions that are going to lead you there, and to feeling the stuff you need to feel in order to not block your access to the free flow, as we've been calling it, that is going to carry you there anyway. And the other thing, of course, is if you're only in your head, you're trying to control everything, which is completely irrational, and you can't do that.
It can never work.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of people have this misconception that being rational means being very cerebral, being very thinky. Actually, your heart is an important source of information. And so you'd be irrational to ignore that. True rationality is just about aligning yourself with reality. And there is so many different sources of what's real. You have to bring them all together into a kind of symphony or kaleidoscopic picture. and to make sense of it by using your actual rationality to do it. And
I just want to to say one thing to that, because you talked about dedicating yourself to the actions that are aligned with your vision, and you need to create this and that. Just let's be clear that it should be a fun process. Right? Again, it's very easy sometimes when I've seen that also with self-development, or when people decide they want to achieve certain things in their life. It's never, don't walk into the trap of making your journey to a happier life another painful experience by making it complicated and heavy and all that. It doesn't have to be, really. It can just be fun. And the more you enjoy, the more you actually have like this light, positive energy. A natural free flow can come from that, from the lightness. The heavier we feel, the harder it is to get into that free flow state.
I think if you're too invested in the result, if you're outcome dependent, which just means that your feelings about yourself, your ability to feel joy with life are dependent on the outcomes that you get. If you're in that mindset, then probably you've set a goal for yourself or a vision for yourself to avoid the uncomfortable emotions. And so the real way to do it, I think, is like you just said, you need to have fun. There needs to be joy. There's not too much pressure. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, well, you'll have still learned about yourself on the way there. And so it's the human being versus the human doing thing. Like if you're too invested in the outcome, then you just become one of these pneumatic drills kind of people that's just acting. They're not experiencing life. So you need to figure out your being by using the kind of techniques you've talked about, using your creativity to figure out your values and so on and so forth, and then put your being into your doing. So you're not just a human being, you're not just a human doing, you're a bridge between the two, a bridge between the being and the doing, which means that you're being real. And I think if you can do that, then you'll probably enjoy life as much as you can as a human.
It's like be, do, and then have. Right? You be, and then your doing is aligned with that, and then what you get will also be aligned. It will go full circle, and that's the beautiful thing.
So there you go. So ultimately, we've figured everything out in this conversation about life. I don't need to make any more podcasts now. This is brilliant. I'm going to save a lot of time.
Let's stop now.
Have you got any final words of wisdom, or is there anything you'd like to say? Also, I'd like you to let people know where they can find you on the internet and all that kind of stuff. And I'll share I'll share everything in the show notes. But if there's anything you want to say, the show is all yours now.
Well, no, I have said a lot of things. It's all about the enjoyment of life. And we have described how that can happen. So enjoy the process, have fun with it, and start small. Don't beat yourself up. That's what I'm going to say. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on my website or on my YouTube channel.
What's your website, just as a starting point for all that?
SabrinaLindnerCoach.com. Very
perfect.
Simple.
There we go. So I'll share that in the show notes. Sabrina, thank you so much for coming on here and letting me get revenge on you, like I said I would. So I feel good now.
A painful experience.
Yes, for both of us. So I'll be able to sleep again now, knowing that this has happened. Yes, I suppose all I need to do now is just say thank you. That's given me a lot of insight as well, and I'm glad that we had this conversation. And in the future, I'll get you on again, if that's okay with you, and we'll see where we are at the time, how we've grown and where we can go next. Okay, Sabrina, thank you.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.